Hello, my dear friends. I hope everyone is well. Today's topic is don't jump to conclusions. It's a very bad idea. When the Jewish people were left Mitzrayim, they were in the desert, Moshe went up to Har Sinai to receive the Torah. He told the people, I'll be back in 40 days. Came the 40th day, and the Chumash says, Vayar ki boshish Moshe, Vayarham ki boshish Moshe. They saw that Moshe was late. And Rashi says that the word Boshe should have been spelled with a vav. It's spelled without a vav, so it's a contraction. Boshesh. Midday came. The 6th hour came, and Moshe didn't return. And they knew that Moshe was supposed to be back. He left in the midday. He was supposed to be back 40 days later. So the people were hysterical. Here they are in the desert, stranded, with no leader, no food, hostile environment. And the Satan created a tremendous irvuvia. He made a tumult, Rashi says. He created images in the sky of Moshe being carried away in a coffin. And the people, feeling that they had no place to turn, decided they're going to build a golden calf in order that the calf should become their leader and their savior. The fact is that the people made a tremendous mistake, because Moshe said, I'll come back in 40 days. He meant that the first day doesn't count. It has to be 40 complete days. They thought that the clock starts ticking the moment he went up the mountain. So it was a misunderstanding. Had they waited another day, there would have been no mistake. Moshe would have returned. But they were impetuous, and they jumped to conclusions, and they decided that Moshe Rabbeinu had passed away. And there was such hysteria that Hur, who's the son of Miriam, tried to stop the people, and they murdered him. So you see how the passions were totally, people's emotions were totally out of control. And the Chumash describes how they danced and they sang around the Egel Hazav. Can you imagine, after receiving the Torah, they're worshiping an idol? All this happened because they jumped to a conclusion. Had they waited another day, had they said, maybe there was some misunderstanding. Let's first figure out what's going on. Why is Moshe not here? Rashi says that the Satan created an imagery of Moshe being carried away in a coffin. So I was wondering, why would God make a miracle for which to represent something was not true, and in the end it will cause the Jewish people to fall? So I thought maybe the Satan was just cloud formations, and the people, because they thought that maybe Moshe died. So when you're worried about something, wherever you turn, you see manifestations of what you're worried about. They were paranoid. They looked at the sky, they saw the clouds, and they said, "Oh, you see, that's a picture of a coffin, and that's Moshe in the coffin being carried away." But be as it may, if the people had not rushed to form a conclusion, the episode of the Egel Hazav would not have happened. And the Chumash says that throughout the rest of Jewish history, whenever God is going to be punishing the Jewish people, there's an element of punishment for the Egel Hazav. It was one of the worst crimes ever committed by Klal Yisrael. It all could have been avoided had they not jumped to a conclusion. There's a terrific story about the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer was one of the greatest poskim in the 19th century. He passed away in 1839. When he was a young boy, he went to study in a yeshiva in the city of Minsk. And as it was the custom then, they didn't have a dining room in the yeshiva. The boys would eat teg. They would go to people's houses and eat. So he ate by a very wealthy man's house. At that period of time, there was a war going on, and the French soldiers stationed themselves in Minsk, and they went into people's houses and they took over the houses. So there was a group of soldiers that lived in the house where the Chassam Sofer was eating his meals. There was one French soldier that took a liking to the Chassam Sofer, and he befriended him, and he asked the Chassam Sofer, was brilliant even as a young boy, and he asked him to teach him certain things, and the soldier said, I'll do you certain favors. The Chassam Sofer was not particularly happy to have a relationship with this French soldier, but he had absolutely no choice. So the French soldier became his friend, so to speak. Fast forward 30 years later, the Chassam Sofer was the Rav in the city of Pressburg, a very prominent Jewish city. and there was a war going on between Austria and France, and the front of the battlefront was in the city of Pressburg, and there were people in Pressburg who went to the government and they said that Chassam Sofer is a spy, and he was brought to court. And in those days, you didn't have much opportunity to defend yourself. Even today, it's that way in many societies. So his life was seriously in danger. He walks into the courtroom, and who does he see? The judge sitting in the chair is his old friend, the French soldier from 30 years ago. So the judge calls the Chassam Sofer into his private room, and he says, "My dear friend," and he hugs him and kisses him. He says, "Obviously, the charges against you were spurious. They're not true, and they're Trump charges. And I'm going to make sure that nothing happens to you. I'll protect you." So the Chassam Sofer said, now he understands the pshat in the pasuk, the meaning of a pasuk in this week's parsha. The Chumash says, Moshe Rabbeinu said to God, "Hodieni nos drachecha." Explain to me your ways. And Rashi says that it means Moshe had questions. Why is it tzaddik v'raro, Rosh v'tova? Why are the tzaddikim suffering and the evil people have it good? So God responded, "You could see my back, but you can't see my face." And there's a lot of different explanations what that means. But the Chassam Sofer says that he understood it after this incident. He understood what it meant. It means that with hindsight, when you look backwards, when you look backwards with hindsight, then oftentimes you'll understand why God is doing things that he does. But at the moment that it's happening, when you see his panai, when you see the face, when you see it as it's unfolding, then it's an enormous mystery. The Chassam Sofer never understood why did he have to why was he befriended? He was a nice, sweet yeshiva boy. He was, I don't even know how old he was, maybe 10 years old. Why did this French soldier take a liking to him? Now he understood. It was God was setting up that in 30 years later, this French soldier would protect the Chassam Sofer. That's for Re'isa Achorai Ufanei Geiro. You'll see with hindsight. They say hindsight is 20/20 vision with hindsight. With hindsight, you're able to understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And oftentimes we have kashas on God. We have questions. How could God do this? How could he do that? Why is he punishing me? Why is this happening to me? And even when it comes to relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we shouldn't, especially relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should not be jumping to conclusions. There's a famous story, it's a humorous story about the Rogatchover Gaon. The Rogatchover was a super genius. He lived in the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. He was a Rav in Dvinsk. He was so brilliant that when he would write svarim, or he would write responsa chuvos, he would quote, sometimes in one paragraph, he would quote 30, 40 sources. And he would, instead of explaining to you what the sources said, or quote them verbatim, he would just say ayin. Ayin means to look up. So ayin, psachim, daf, nun, dalad, beis. Look up psachim, and daf, naf, nun, dalad. Look up zvachim, tosis, daf, ayin, peyam, and al. And to understand the writing of the Rogatchover is a very difficult task. There have been svarim written on the Rogatchover's writings just to explain the sources that he's quoting and what the point is that he's making from these sources. So they tell the story that there was a man who wrote a letter to the Rogatchover. His name was Rabbi Yosef Rosen. He wrote a letter to the Rogatchover. He lived in the city of Rogatchover. He asked the Rogatchover a kasha that he had. Question. He had a very difficult question. He says, the kasha is so great, I can't continue learning until I know the answer to the kasha. So the Rogatchover responded, ayin, tosis, zvachim, daf, whatever. Go look up the tosis in this place in the Masechta of Zvachim. So the man looked it up, and he's so excited. The Rogatchover told him where to find the answer to his kasha. The tosis had nothing to do with his kasha. He couldn't understand what is the tosis, and he's thinking and trying to figure it out. So finally, he wrote another letter to the Rogatchover. He says, could you please explain to me, how does this Tosas answer my kasha? So the Rogatchover said, you look at that Tosas asks a question, and he doesn't have an answer for the question. And he says, Tzarach in Gadol, which means it requires an enormous work or insight, discovery, to try to figure out the answer to this question. Tosas doesn't offer an answer. So he says, nonetheless, even though Tosas says Tzarach in Gadol, the Tosas, you look at the next Tosas continues writing his commentary. So you see that Tosas was not bothered by the fact that he had a kasha. The reason why I referred you to that Tosas is because you said, after this kasha, until I have an answer to my question, I can't go further. The Rogatchover is saying, well, you see, Tosas was not so perturbed as you are. And that's how we are in life. We get stuck. We have kashas. We have kashas in Emunah. We can't understand. We can't go further. There's an expression in Yiddish, from a kasha starpenish. From a kasha, you don't die. There's many things that we don't know. There's many things in the sciences that we don't understand. There's all sorts of mysteries in the universe. Scientists don't know if light is a particle or a wave or it's both. There's contradictions. There are a lot of unresolved mysteries in the world. When it comes to Kadosh Baruch Hu, people feel, if I don't understand what God is doing, then must be there is no God. That's jumping to a conclusion that's totally unfounded. A person could have a kasha, but he has to hold it in abeyance. The Gemara says that Elisha ben Avua was a great Tana, and he became a heretic because he saw a young boy climbing. His father told him to get something from a tree. He climbed up the tree, and he fell off the tree and died. The Chumash says that by the mitzvah of Kibud Aveim, it says that in order that your life should be longer, be elongated. So this Elisha ben Avua didn't understand. The Torah's promise is that by fulfilling the mitzvah of Kibud Aveim, you'll live longer. And here is this boy who fell off a tree fulfilling the mitzvah of Kibud Aveim. So the Gemara explains that the answer to his question was that when the Torah says you live longer, it doesn't mean in this world; it means in the world to come. But Elisha ben Avua, he didn't have that teretz. He didn't know how to respond to his question. So what did he do? He became a heretic. The Gemara refers to him as Acher, the other one. They don't even refer to him by his name. If he had been a little bit more patient and not jumped to conclusions, he would have not become the heretic that he was, which he threw for shame for generations, and he would have remained the distinguished Talmid Chacham Elisha ben Avua. There's a mitzvah of being dan l'kaf zchus. You're supposed to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's very hard for people to give others the benefit of the doubt. We jump to conclusions. That's how we are. That's how human beings are. We say, you see, I have proof that the person's no good. Look at this, what happened. And the error is that if you see something that bothers you, then find out. Talk to the person. Investigate. Don't just say, you see, it proves, and I knew it, and I had suspicions of him to begin with. You have to always find out. I've told many stories in shul about things that happened to me where I was not dan l'kaf zchus, even though I give so many drushes about being dan l'kaf zchus, but I like everybody else, I still jump to conclusions. But I know, in hindsight, that it's wrong. So here's one of the stories. You may recall I told the story years ago. I came to the OU in the morning one day, and I had my lunch. I brought my lunch with me in my briefcase, and I took my lunch and I put it in the refrigerator to be able to eat later. So it comes 12:30, 1 o'clock. I'm nice and hungry, and I was going to go retrieve my lunch, and lo and behold, there's no lunch in the refrigerator. Somebody stole my lunch. Who stole my lunch? So I'm looking around the office to see the people that are sitting in the area, and I'm thinking, is it possible that person stole my lunch? Well, maybe so. I saw some strange behavior of that person. A few weeks ago, he was not nice to somebody. He said something nasty. Maybe he stole my lunch. Or maybe it was one of the women that stole my lunch. Or maybe it was this one. Or maybe it was a cleanup person. Or a maintenance person. Or an electrician. And wherever I looked, as soon anyone passed by, I thought, maybe that's the person that stole my lunch. Well, I was really upset. I came home that evening, And I put my briefcase on the table, and I took out some papers that I had in my briefcase. And what do you think was in my briefcase? My lunch. I thought I put it in the refrigerator, but I didn't. And here I had all these theories of this one stole it and that one. They were all completely unfounded with absolutely no basis. That's not being down with kapslus. Down with kapslus means you have to give people the benefit of the doubt, because until you investigate, you don't have a right. You have to be like a scientist. Scientists don't jump to conclusions. They do all sorts of experiments and have to have a control. They don't just jump to conclusions. So that's how we have to be like scientists. We have to be careful not to formulate conclusions. A lot of times people say things and they tell us things, and you hear about an episode or an incident, and we get all excited. Don't get excited. First, find out. Talk to the other person. I tell this to people all the time. Talk to the other person and ask what happened. What is the story? Sometimes you'll find out that there was information that was missing. Other times, the person, in fact, did something wrong, and by talking to that person, you bring it to his or her attention, and more than not, the likelihood is that the person, if indeed something was inappropriate, the person will apologize. So here I gave you a number of examples. The Egel Hazav took place because they jumped to conclusions. The Chassam Sofer says, "V'isa esachorai pani lo yero," that you could understand things with hindsight, and he had that experience with the soldier that befriended him when he was a young boy. The Rugged Shever says that he told the fellow says, "I can't go further." So Rugged Shever says, "Well, look, Tosis had questions, but he went further." And I told you about Elisha ben Avua, who became an apikairis because he saw the boy climbing the tree and he fell off, and he thought, like, he can't be, doesn't make sense. And finally, I told the story about my lunch. So what do we learn from all this? That jumping to a conclusion is like jumping off a cliff. You never know where you are going to land. So let's not just close our eyes and blindly jump to conclusions and say, I knew it, this and that. Let's first explore and examine, and that way we won't end up landing in some place where we don't want to be.